What if whispers in the dark could lead to the gallows? What if fear and suspicion were enough to tear a community apart? In the chilly spring of 1692, the small Puritan village of Salem, Massachusetts, became the epicenter of one of the most infamous and haunting events in American history. It started with whispers in the dark and eerie fits of hysteria among young girls. These fits were described as unnatural. The girls screamed, contorted their bodies into grotesque shapes, and claimed to be tormented by invisible forces. Soon, these whispers turned into cries of witchcraft, and the once peaceful community descended into chaos. Fear gripped the townsfolk as accusations spread like wildfire. Neighbor turned against neighbor, and even the most respected members of the community were not safe from suspicion. The accused were not only ostracized but also subjected to intense and often terrifying scrutiny. The courtroom scenes were nightmarish, with accusers convulsing and crying out in supposed pain caused by the witch's spells. Spectral evidence, a controversial form of testimony where witnesses claimed to see the spirit of the accused committing acts of witchcraft, sealed the fates of many. In total, over 200 individuals were accused of practicing witchcraft. The accused faced grim trials, often with no evidence beyond spectral visions and hearsay. Those found guilty were shackled in damp, overcrowded cells, enduring hunger, disease, and despair. Public executions were gruesome spectacles. The condemned were paraded to the gallows, their prayers drowned out by the jeers of the crowd. The hanging tree became a symbol of the community's collective hysteria. One of the most harrowing moments was the death of Giles Corey, who refused to plead guilty or innocent. He was subjected to pressing, a torturous method where heavy stones were piled onto his chest. His last words, "More weight," echoed the unbearable suffering of the era. The trials were brutal, but what drove this frenzy of fear and injustice? Historians have pointed to a combination of religious extremism, economic tensions, personal vendettas, and mass hysteria. In a deeply religious society, the fear of the devil and his supposed earthly agents fueled paranoia. Economic disputes and long-standing feuds among families further fanned the flames, as accusations of witchcraft became a weapon for settling scores. This toxic mix created a perfect storm that consumed the community. By the time the hysteria subsided in early 1693, 20 people had been executed, 14 hanged, 5 died in prison, and 1 was pressed to death. The community began to awaken to the horrors of what had transpired. The aftermath of the trials left a scar on Salem's history. Survivors and families of the victims struggled to rebuild their lives. In later years, the courts admitted the trials were a grave mistake, and restitution was granted to some of the victims' families. However, the pain and shame lingered for generations. Today, the Salem Witch Trials serve as a stark cautionary tale against the dangers of unchecked fear, blind faith, and the consequences of ignoring reason. The haunting legacy of Salem reminds us how fragile the bonds of trust and humanity can be when overshadowed by suspicion and hysteria. Thank you for joining us in exploring this dark and chilling chapter of history. Stay tuned for more true horror events.